This is episode 4 of the Gambling Still Sucks podcast. In this episode, I'll be sharing how I went from being someone that absolutely hated gambling to becoming a compulsive gambler myself. Hey there, and welcome to the Gambling Still Sucks podcast. I am Jamie. I'm a compulsive gambler, and I'm also the host of this show. The last day I gambled was July 15th of 2010. Now, in the last episode, I shared my story about running off the riverboat, right? The last day that I gambled. And that was the July 15th, 2010 riverboat episode, as I like to call it. Well, this episode, I wanted to give you sort of the backstory. We kind of started with the last day I gambled, but how did I get to the point where I was? And especially given my background, and I'll be sharing, I absolutely hated gambling growing up. And so how did I make that transition? And so let's start way back at the beginning. I'm not going to go all the way back into childhood, but I remember the very first time I walked into a casino. And it was in Atlantic City. I was there for a golf tournament. And my mom and I were there, and we were just doing touristy things. We had a day to spend or whatever. So we just were walking around Atlantic City, and we went into one of the casinos. And I just remember looking out and being like, man, this is really sort of cool. And it was one of those things, I think the fact that it was restricted, I wasn't old enough to do it, was definitely a huge part of the appeal. And my mom is not a gambler at all. If you know my mom, you know she is the original couponer before there ever was a couponer. So the thought of going and dumping money into a casino was definitely not something she was interested, but we just were taking in the sights, right? But me, as an 18-year-old, my eyes lit up. And I remember thinking, man, I'm excited to come back here at some point. And so that was my very first experience with a casino. And then fast forward a year or so, at the time, my sister was living in Buffalo, and they had casinos up there. And I remember one time, right after I turned 19, in Canada, you could drink and you could gamble. And so we went up, and it was more to go to the bar. And we went out and celebrated me turning 19. And then we ended up going to the casino, which didn't seem like a big thing, but it was super exciting for me. Because I remember back, like I said, I had seen a casino, and I'd seen these things, and I was like, man, at some point when I'm old enough, I definitely want to go back. And so we did it. We did sort of the slot machine and basic stuff. Probably lost 20, 30, 40 bucks. I don't remember. Nothing big. And that was really the only time I went. And so we didn't have casinos around us. They weren't legal. You had to be 21. And so from the time I was 19 until later on, I didn't go to casinos because I couldn't. And it was fun. But at that point, I was definitely like, I understand the entertainment aspect of it. It was a really cool night out, but I wasn't trying to sneak off and find different places. And a lot of that was probably because there weren't places I could recreate that experience, aside from driving the 6 hours up to Buffalo and going over to Canada. And so it wasn't something that I did. And so I start college, and I'm not really involved in gambling in any type really. But then I find out that one of my really close friends has a gambling problem. And at the time, they were reaching out to me to help them with their finances because they were struggling to make their bills. And I eventually found out that the reason was because they were going to the casino and losing their money in slot machines. And so here I am, a college kid, and I'm helping out my friend. And of course, I'm going to help out because it's one of my best friends. And so I'm doing that, and I'm helping them get on a budget. And as we gamblers do, we have the best intentions. And I really do believe that we all do have best intentions. We believe we're going to stop, but the addiction is so strong that it overcomes us. And my friend was no different. And so it was repeated times they'd go back to the casino and lose more money, and I'd have to send more money. And it was one of those things that it just became more frustrating for me because I wasn't a compulsive gambler and I didn't understand it. I was like, okay, just stop going. If you stop going, all the problems are going to go away. You have a job. We got you set up on a budget. We have all your finances laid out. I knew kind of every detail of financial stuff that they needed, and the money was there if they just stopped going to the casino. They were going to have no problem making their bills. But as we know, that is more difficult than it seems. And so obviously over this time, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a year or so, and I'm continuing to send off money and get more and more frustrated. And so, I hated gambling. And so as much fun as I had in those first few times, I'm like, this sucks. And I started to just hate gambling, especially casino gambling, because I saw the impact it was having on my friend and it was having on me. And it was awful. There's nothing else I can say about it. And so I hated gambling. And at that time, if you told me, okay, fast forward, you're going to become a compulsive gambler yourself, I would have laughed at you, told you all about my experience and been like, there's no way I'm going to ever be like that, because I know how tough it is. I see my friend, they're trying to stop. I believe they are trying to stop, and they physically cannot stop. It's not that they're making a choice. They just cannot do it. I know they're a smart person and they have the money, and like I said, all those things, they just can't do it. And so I hated gambling. I never thought I would get into it. And yet here I am today. And so how did I get to this point? So the summer after my sophomore year in college, I was hanging out a lot more with my friends from school. And the one afternoon, summer afternoon, we probably played golf in the morning, went over to one of my friends, their friend's house, and they were playing cards. They were playing poker. And at the time, I'd never played poker. Even my family didn't play cards like that growing up. So I had no clue how the game worked. Any form of poker. I knew probably the 101 version, which was, it was a card game and you got certain cards and you had to make hands. And I sort of knew what some of the hands were, but didn't know many of them, straights and flushes and full houses and all those types of things. No clue. But I'm watching these guys play. They're all my age. And it was Texas Hold'em. And I'm like, all right, I'm slowly starting to figure this out. And watching them, I watched for, 45 minutes to an hour. And eventually I joined in, bought in. It was maybe $10, $20, something like that. Not too much money. But started playing, and I was terrible, obviously, because like I say, I didn't even know what the hands were. But as I started to play, I started to pick up on it. And I'm pretty much a quick learner. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And I had a good time with it. And so that was the first time I sat down and played poker, especially Texas Hold'em. And so this was during the summer of 2003. And for anyone that was in the poker industry back then or into poker, realizes that this was the year that the World Series of Poker really went mainstream on ESPN. ESPN started showing it just like they would NBA games or NFL games, and it was a weekly series, and it all built up to the end where this average dude from Kentucky, I think he was, Chris Moneymaker, who was just an everyday accountant, normal guy, ended up beating all these pros and won all this money in playing Texas Hold'em in the World Series of Poker. Now, being whatever we were, early 20s, college kids living in a house together, this was something that we were all watching because we watched everything ESPN. And so we had played some casual Texas Hold'em, but as we watched that show, we started playing more and more. And so our house would have games where we'd just get together. It was one of those things that we just did. I mean, we'd all get together, play a game of Texas Hold'em, and then we go out to the bars or do whatever college kids do. And so as we start playing and I really start digging into the game, I start to realize, okay, this is all about math. And I was a math kid growing up. Math was always my easiest subject. I was the mental math champion in 6th and 7th grade in our county, which was just solving basic math problems in your head with no pencil or paper. And so math was always something that came easy to me. So as I started to get into poker and Texas Hold'em, I realized this is all just math. Okay, so I mean, there's probability, and depending on what hands you have, I mean, you start with probabilities. There are different odds that happen based on the first 3 cards that come out, and then each other card, there's probability on what's going to happen. And so as I started getting into it, I'm like, okay, this is a game that, unlike the slot machines, which I had said, okay, I'm never doing those because you can't win. I saw that with my friend. You can't beat slot machines. The math side of me knew you can't beat blackjack. You can't beat any of these games. I mean, blackjack is probably the one that's closest to people think they can count cards. But at the end of the day, the casino has the odds in their hand, in their advantage on every game they have. If you play long enough, you will lose. Really, the only variance is their only risk is that the early time you win and then you never come back. Because if you continue to play that same game, the odds are in their favor and they will eventually, the math just works out and it's in their favor. But what I started seeing with poker, and obviously playing with my friends, some people weren't very good. Some people didn't know the math. Some people gave away every time they had a good hand. And there were these things, and all of a sudden poker, you were playing against someone else. It wasn't a game you were playing against the house. And for me, that seemed different. Less like gambling and more like a game of skill. And so I started obviously diving in more. And then with the boom of the World Series of Poker on ESPN, then they started with the online stuff. And I remember Party Poker came out. And it was something, I don't remember, I think one of my roommates said, "Hey, look, did you know you can play cards online?" And I was like, that sounds cool, because I was the type, I never wanted our games to end. I was all for playing. I mean, if we would have played every night, I would have had our home game at our house every night, because I had so much, I was having so much fun playing it. It was competitive. And at this time I had stopped playing competitive golf. I played up until my sophomore year in college. And so the Texas Hold'em, the poker, started to fill my competitive needs. And so when we weren't playing as a house, all of a sudden, hey, I can do this. I can sit in my room in my college house and I can play poker online. And I thought that was pretty cool. And so I started playing online, and still at this point, I'm very, very, very conservative. The memories of my friend and their struggles was extremely fresh, and I didn't want to repeat that experience. And so, I mean, all the adverts about, hey, you need to gamble within your means, that was me. I mean, I was, okay, I can only put in X amount of dollars. If I get up to a certain number, I'm going to cash out. If I lose, it's just over, I'm done. And my account was seriously, like, I'd put in $25, and if it got up to 75 or 50, I forget what my number was, then I would cash it out. And it's amazing. Anybody that's playing in modern day online casinos or other things knows that the cash outs now, I mean, you need 4 forms of ID, I mean, a blood sample, a urine sample, and a week or so before they want to give you your money back, but they'll take it instantly. And that's a pet peeve of mine, but I digress. But back then, you could put your money on today, on a Tuesday, you could hit cash out, and tomorrow or the next day at the latest, absolute latest, the money would be back in your account. So the online money really was like cash at a casino, where you put it in and you could get it back very, very quickly. And so that kind of fit in with my plan. Okay, I'll put in $25. When it gets up to X amount of dollars, I'll cash it out. Perfect. And I did that for a while. And I didn't win. I was probably 50-50 as far as winning, but continued to play and got better and better, and did what most gamblers do. All of a sudden, instead of playing the $10 or $25 table, I was playing the $50 buy-in table. Or, okay, maybe I'll just play the $100 buy-in table. And so over time, my stakes started to rise. And this is where my gambling really started to become a problem, because I was starting to lose, and I mean, I would win, but I would lose much, much more than I could afford. I was a college student working part-time jobs barely. And so the fluctuation in income was obviously not a good thing. And my competitiveness and my addictive personality started kicking in, and I was playing more and more often and going to class less and less often. And so this combination of thinking that it was different, playing against other people, the availability that online, all these things sort of manifested themselves all sort of in the same time, which before I even knew it, and I didn't know it at the time, it's not until many years later, but they all worked together to switch me from being somebody that absolutely hated gambling to somebody that was gambling on probably a daily basis outside my means and had no intention to stop. And so as much as that warning was there for me in the beginning from seeing my friend in their struggles and saying, okay, I'm going to be different, I was slowly working my way into having a big gambling problem. And I think that's how it probably typically works you don't necessarily just instantly jump in and have a problem. We all have, there's those big wins that hook us. And I had one of those. I had a month where I did really, really well and was looking at it, I'm like, man, I'm not going to make this much money if I graduate next year from college and get a normal job. I wouldn't make this much money. And here I am just sitting playing poker in my room. And that's what happened with my gambling. All of a sudden, I slowly went from being somebody, I hated gambling, to, well, my friends are doing it. So it's socially acceptable. We're all playing it. It's on TV. And we're playing in our house for small stakes. Definitely, 10, if somebody lost $20, that was a lot of money they lost. Maybe 30. But then all of a sudden, now I'm playing $25 tables online, then 50, then 100. And then I'm playing 2 tables of 50 or 2 tables of 100. And eventually, at my worst, I got up to the point where I bought a second computer screen so I could play 8 tables at once. And the buy-ins were anywhere from $100 to $200 a table. And so I had anywhere from $800 to $1,600 in play at a time, trying to manage all these tables, which was absolute insanity. And I'll get into some of those things on another episode. But I think you start to see now how this evolution happened, how I went from being someone that hated gambling to being this addicted gambler. I bring this up just because it's like a warning story, and it just shows, it shows my history, so you can kind of get an idea of who I am and how I got to the place I am, but also the awareness that it can hit anybody. And it's amazing whether it's the ego or just the adrenaline or dopamine that drives us and all of a sudden starts to make us, rationalize the fact that we're different. I was different than my friend, and here I am, I'm doing the same thing they are, gambling with outside their means, but mine was different because I was playing poker and I was playing against other people and I could get better, which I was. But now with a lot of time between when I last gambled, I can start to see that there was never going to be an amount of winning that was ever going to satisfy me. My competitiveness and my desire to be the best and to be better and better was always going to be something that got me in trouble. And so that's how I transformed from someone that absolutely hated gambling, despised gambling, said I'll never, ever, ever do it, to being somebody that had 8 tables of poker playing at once, well beyond my means, and was deep in addiction and accumulating debt. I'll pick up this story in a later episode, but we're going to take off my story in the next few to get into some more of the things that I'm about with this podcast. And because I don't want it to just be about my story, I want to share some of my thoughts, my experiences along the way, and mainly the things that have worked for me, the things that I've seen that have worked for other people. And so I'm going to take a little break from my story. We'll definitely rejoin it, and I'll be telling pieces throughout, but I'm going to jump into something different in the next episode. As a disclaimer, this podcast does not provide legal or medical advice. Look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a therapist. I'm just a guy that had a gambling problem. So while we'll discuss a lot of topics and I'll provide a lot of insight into what's worked for me, please seek out the help of a professional. Go visit a lawyer, a doctor, or a therapist to help you deal with your gambling problem. The information that we discuss is for informational purposes and should not be taken as professional legal or medical advice. And reliance on the information appearing on this podcast is solely at your own risk. The music for this podcast is Something Elated by Broke for Free and is licensed under the Creative Commons.